What's up YouTube, how you doing? Adam here, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you about ISO on a DSLR camera, or in fact any camera that allows you to change the ISO sensitivity in the settings. Now in fact most compact cameras actually enable you to do this now manually if you want to. Definitely all DSLR cameras allow you to do it, and sometimes in fact even some smartphone cameras allow you to change the ISO sensitivity. Now what is ISO sensitivity? Well, ISO is the sensitiveness of the sensor in your camera to light. So the lower the ISO that you have set in your camera, the less sensitive it is to light, therefore requiring more light. The higher the ISO setting in your camera, the more sensitive to light it is, therefore requiring less light. Now how do we measure ISO? Well, it's in a range of numbers. Now most DSLR cameras in the kind of beginner to mid-range will go somewhere in the region of about 100 up to 3200 or maybe even 6400. The D7000 that I've got here goes from 100 to 6400. You may find in something like a D3100 or an 1100D that it goes in the region of 100 to 3200, but that's kind of irrelevant. The point is that the lower the ISO, the less sensitive the sensor is to light, therefore requiring more light to correctly expose the picture. The higher the ISO, the more sensitive it is to light, and therefore requiring less light to light the picture, or in fact the video if you're doing video work with your DSLR or your compact camera. Now how does it do this? Well, essentially what happens is the sensor enlarges the pixels and makes the sensor more sensitive to light as you go up the ISO range. Now the problem is with going up in the ISO range, because a lot of people may well say, well, why don't I just shoot at 3200 or 6400 all the time, is that the higher you go up, the larger the pixels get on the sensor, and therefore the more grain you're going to have in your pictures. They're also going to lose some of the vividness of the colours and some of the colour accuracy as well, and you may even introduce a range of kind of greens or something into your picture to add to that level of grain. So the idea is that you keep the ISO as low as possible all the time, while still giving you the shutter speed and the aperture that you're going to require to correctly expose the picture. Generally you'll find that if it's very bright outside, you can have an ISO of around 100 to 200. If you're indoors and it's kind of maybe light outside, maybe something like 400 to 800. If it's starting to get dark, then you're going to need to go quite far up above that range. Now, the better the camera, the better the high level ISO performance is. If you have something like a D3S, for example, you're going to be able to bump the ISO up to a ridiculous number and still get almost grain-free pictures. However, if you've got something like a D3100, a D5100, then the ISO, you're not going to be able to put it up quite so high without introducing a lot of kind of grain and unwanted textures into your picture. Now, how do we go about actually setting the ISO? Well, I'm using a Nikon D7000 here, and there's a few ways in which you can actually set the ISO on the camera. Now, if we turn the camera on, the first way on the D7000 is on the LCD screen on the top. Now, what we do in order to change that is on the back of the camera, we've got an ISO button. We simply hold that down and then we rotate the dial on the back of the camera to actually change the ISO up and down simply by spinning the wheel. Now, another way to do this is to actually go into the menu on your camera, and then on the back of your camera, once you're in your menu, you're going to have the ability to go into the ISO sensitivity there and change it exactly as you want to and set it within the menu itself. Now there's one other way in which you can do it, and that is to put the camera into live view mode. Again, hold down the ISO button on the back of the camera or wherever it may be on your particular brand, and then change the ISO, and you can see it going up and down there at the bottom. Now obviously that is going to change depending on what kind of camera you've got. If you've got a reasonably new Nikon, then it's going to probably be pretty much the same as how I just showed you there. If you've got a Canon, it's probably not going to be exactly the same button, because obviously the buttons are laid out and labelled slightly differently, but it probably will be a question of holding down the ISO button whilst turning a dial, or going into the menu, finding ISO sensitivity and changing it manually in there, or again doing the same thing whilst you're in live view mode. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you subscribe for more, and I will see you all in the next one. See ya.